started hitting me in the face, and I got cut up and took off a chunk of my nose. And it hit me all around the eye. It's the stunt stuff, They were shooting, I was doing a scene in this truck, and they put the script.
What if the world's most legendary martial artists ever crossed swords, and the footage just dropped? In a secret clip that's already sparking millions of shares, Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee face off in a showdown no one saw coming. From the same elite Los Angeles circles in 1966 to the epic Return of the Dragon vision, these two icons have always been on a collision course. And now, at 85, Chuck Norris finally opens up about why so many stars refuse to work with the dragon himself. Stay tuned as we unveil the full jaw-dropping footage and dig into the shocking truths behind their rivalry, a fight that's finally gone viral and is rewriting martial arts history. In the summer of 1966, the air over Los Angeles crackled with a quiet energy that only those entrenched in the world of martial arts could feel. The streets were bustling with tourists, the skyline glittered with Hollywood glamour, yet in hidden corners of the city, a quiet revolution was stirring. It was here that two young men, each carved from a different lineage of discipline, would cross paths and unknowingly set the stage for a legacy that would ripple through generations. Bruce Lee, then a budding icon, had already captured the imagination of a growing crowd with his sharp, fluid movements on the screen. He was still a fledgling actor, taking on roles such as the iconic KO on the Green Hornet, but his mind was already turning toward a new realm, the creation of a film that would not just entertain but redefine how the world perceived martial arts. He imagined a scene so intense, so pure, that it would linger in the minds of viewers long after the credits rolled. He called it Return of the Dragon, a name that resonated with power and mystique. Across the city, in a small dojo tucked away behind a row of brick buildings, Chuck Norris was sharpening his own skills. A quiet, determined figure, he had earned a reputation as a formidable karate champion, having claimed the title of professional middleweight karate champion for 6 consecutive years. His style was grounded in Tong Sudo and American karate, emphasizing precise, high-kicking techniques, structured movement, and relentless discipline. He was the embodiment of rigor and control, a man who could stop a man mid-attack with a single movement. Their introduction was not a dramatic clash or a press event. It was a simple handshake among mutual acquaintances in the martial arts community. A friend who respected both men arranged a meeting, hoping to bridge two worlds that were still largely separate. For Bruce, who was constantly pushing the boundaries of what was possible, the prospect of training with someone as disciplined and powerful as Norris was irresistible. For Norris, the chance to learn from a man whose reputation was already spreading like wildfire was an opportunity he could not refuse. They began training in private settings, away from the prying eyes of cameras and fans. The sessions were intimate, filled with sweat and quiet focus. They did not engage in a public showdown. Instead, they let their bodies speak in a language that transcended words. In the quiet of the dojo, the two men exchanged techniques, each absorbing the other's strengths. Norris brought his high, crisp kicks, the devastating roundhouse kicks, and the precise control that had defined his career. Bruce, in turn, introduced Norris to the fluid, unpredictable motion that would become a hallmark of his philosophy. He showed him how to move like water, how to strike not just with the body, but with the mind. Bruce's hand speed was otherworldly, his footwork swift and unpredictable, and his ability to read an opponent's next move bordered on the supernatural. Beyond the physical, the two men shared a deeper conversation about philosophy and the essence of martial arts. They discussed the limitations of rigid styles, the need to adapt to any situation, and the importance of mental fortitude. Norris was struck by Bruce's emphasis on formlessness and adaptability. He began to understand that a true martial artist must flow with the circumstances, never meeting resistance head-on, but instead bending around it. Bruce's philosophy was revolutionary. He believed in intercepting attacks, using the most direct path, and combining styles seamlessly, making him dangerously unpredictable. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. When Bruce finally cast Norris in his film, it was not because he wanted a generic villain. Bruce saw in Norris a worthy rival, a man who could stand tall in the face of greatness. The film that came to fruition was The Way of the Dragon, a cinematic masterpiece that would become a testament to the power of collaboration between two legends. The film's most iconic scene took place in the heart of ancient history, Rome's Colosseum. The arena, once built for blood sport, now echoed with a different kind of clash, one that was not about brute force, but about artistry. To film this scene, Bruce and the production team had to devise a plan that would maintain the authenticity of combat while navigating logistical hurdles. They bribed a local supplier for cheap access to the arena, and a small crew was hired to record the fight. The scene was shot in 2 days, with the camera crew working tirelessly under the scorching Roman sun. When the battle began, Bruce moved with the precision and speed that had earned him the title of the Dragon. He struck with lightning reflexes, striking not for points, but to dismantle his opponent entirely. Bruce had always approached combat with a singular focus, a mentality that made him unstoppable. He fought not to win a round, but to ensure his survival. Bruce did not fight for ego or applause. He fought against everything that stood in the way of victory. Fear, pain, ego, all dissolved when Bruce entered his combat mode. He was never fighting a single person. He was fighting everything that could impede his path to triumph. Norris, with his undefeated world karate record, had never been beaten in a real fight by Bruce. He had outkicked Bruce in many early sessions, showcasing his own strengths. Yet Bruce was not in a hurry to prove superiority. He saw each sparring session as a classroom, studying movement patterns, identifying gaps, and dismantling them. Bruce used Norris's strengths against him, combining them with hand traps, blurring their line of sight. He turned Norris's own kicks into setups, faking them out and turning them into misdirection. The balance of power began to shift, with Bruce adopting Norris's techniques, but with a twist that made them faster, sharper, and more deceptive. He combined them with an unexpected blend of styles, adding a new layer of complexity that made his movements seem like a ghost thinking 10 steps ahead. The Colosseum duel became a meditation on combat. The fight was not a flashy spectacle, but a stripped-down meditation on philosophy and movement. Bruce, in the role of the Dragon, was the embodiment of flexibility over force, self-expression over mechanical repetition. He dismantled Norris's form not just physically, but ideologically, illustrating the triumph of adaptability over sheer power. The scene ended with Norris falling, but with a smile on his face, a testament to the respect he had for Bruce and the reverence that had taken root over time. In the years that followed, the scene endured in the collective memory of martial arts enthusiasts. It became a masterclass in choreography, a testament to the artistry of combat. Bruce's vision had been realized, but his life was cut short before he could fully reap the fruits of his labor. In 2015, when Chuck Norris, now 85, spoke openly about the reasons behind Hollywood's fear of Bruce Lee, his voice carried the weight of decades of experience. He explained that Bruce had not only been a film star, but a force of nature whose presence on screen and in life demanded respect. Many actors of that era consistently refused to work with Bruce, which only amplified the typecasting that limited his influence in Hollywood. Norris's candid confession, "Bruce would have beaten me," shocked fans worldwide. It was a statement that went beyond typical bravado, revealing a man who, at the pinnacle of physical discipline, could still admit defeat in the presence of a greater force. He had spent his life at the pinnacle of physical discipline, a 6-time undefeated world karate champion. And yet, when it came to Bruce Lee, his tone shifted from competition to reverence. He described Bruce as a student in the truest sense, analyzing each movement and using an opponent's strengths against them. Bruce's mindset, to fight like his life depended on it, gave him an edge that few could handle. He was never fighting just one person. He was fighting against fear, pain, and ego. Their collaboration on the Way of the Dragon cemented their bond as a powerful statement of mutual respect. In that cinematic masterpiece, they had shown the world that combat could be more than a contest. It could be an art form that transcended violence. Bruce's statement, his masterwork, fused philosophy with fists, cinema with combat, and legacy with legend. Chuck Norris found in Bruce the perfect counterbalance, not a villain, but a worthy rival. The legend's candid confession is a story not often heard from a fighter of his caliber. The Colosseum, now a symbol of ancient blood sport, had become the backdrop for a new kind of clash. The ancient stones echoed with a different kind of violence, one that transcended physical brutality and approached something akin to meditation on movement. For Bruce, the fight was a final statement, a declaration that his philosophy would endure beyond his physical presence. For Chuck, it was an honor to have stood tall in the face of greatness, even in defeat, and to have walked away with a smile and a deep sense of respect for a man he considered the Dragon. In the dim light of the studio, where the cameras hovered like watchful eyes, Bruce Lee moved not as a performer, but as a force of nature. His every gesture carried years of disciplined practice, a quiet confidence that eclipsed the flashy bravado that had become the hallmark of many Hollywood stars at the time. It was this authenticity that first sent ripples through the industry. When Bruce would take a pause, his breathing steady, the air seemed to vibrate with the intensity of someone who had turned the physical into a living philosophy. For those who had grown comfortable with scripted lines and rehearsed punches, his presence shattered the illusion that a film set could remain a mere stage. Actors who had once seemed open to the idea of a collaboration found themselves staring into a furnace that threatened to consume the comfortable facades of their craft. They did not retreat because Bruce was difficult, nor because he demanded perfection. He was simply too real. He dismantled every layer of pretense, revealing the fragile scaffolding of a set that depended on surface theatrics. Bruce's revolutionary approach went beyond the mat or the camera. The Jeet Kune Do philosophy he cultivated was a fusion of fluidity and principle, a system that treated the body as an extension of the mind. Rather than a rigid sequence of moves, Jeet Kune Do taught practitioners to perceive space as an open dialogue, an opportunity for each instant to respond with the most efficient form. This approach echoed the way Bruce would later choreograph the fight in The Way of the Dragon, a conversation of bodies, a series of gestures that spoke louder than words. The purists of the East, bound by tradition, viewed this new system with suspicion. They saw it as an affront to established disciplines, a betrayal of centuries of technique that demanded repetition and mechanical precision. But for Bruce, and for the few who would listen, Jeet Kune Do was not a betrayal, but an evolution, a step toward an ideal where movement is both purposeful and elegant. Chuck Norris, with his polished karate stripes and unwavering discipline, entered this world as a contemporary peer who could bridge the gap between traditional American martial arts and Bruce's avant-garde philosophy. Their meetings on the mat were less a rivalry than a mutual exchange of knowledge. Chuck's background in competitive karate, his deep understanding of katas, and the measured application of force complemented Bruce's philosophical fluidity. When they sparred, the clash of styles created a synthesis that neither could achieve alone. Chuck, who had earned his reputation through years of competition, found himself humbled and inspired by Bruce's ability to fuse speed, strategy, and spirituality into a single blow. In return, Bruce appreciated Chuck's discipline, recognizing that the steady mechanical force could stand as a counterpoint to his own dynamic flow. This partnership, formed in the heat of the studio and the rhythm of the dojo, forged a relationship built on sweat, mutual respect, and a shared desire to push the boundaries of what a martial artist could be. The decision to bring these two titans together on screen came in 1972 under circumstances that were as unlikely as they were profound. The Way of the Dragon was conceived as a personal passion project, a film meant to resonate with Asian audiences, and produced with a modest budget that belied the ambition of its creators. Filmed in Rome, the film's backdrop of ancient Roman architecture gave it an exotic allure that complemented the martial artistry of its leads. The climactic duel, staged in the heart of the Colosseum, became the film's defining moment, a spectacle that turned the cinema into a living stage, where every punch and block carried weight beyond mere spectacle. The choreography, a dance of brute strength and graceful precision, showcased the complementary strengths of Bruce's Jeet Kune Do and Chuck's karate foundations. Each movement, each pause in the fight, was a testament to their deep mutual understanding, an exchange of philosophies that turned the scene into a living lesson. The impact of that single scene rippled outward in ways that even the filmmakers could not have predicted. Audiences around the globe, drawn by the film's dazzling fight choreography and exotic setting, began to recognize the possibility of action cinema that was both poetic and purposeful. Bruce and Chuck's collaboration opened a door for martial arts films to move beyond the dimly lit dojos of niche theaters and step into the spotlight of mainstream cinema. The world learned that an action sequence could be a conversation, where each strike was a statement, each block a response, and that the beauty of movement could coexist with the brutality of combat. The legacy of The Way of the Dragon is measured not merely in ticket sales, but in the countless practitioners who, after watching that film, tied a black belt to their waist and vowed to learn more, driven by the desire to reach the level of discipline and fluidity displayed by the two legends. Years later, when Chuck Norris reached the age of 85, he finally spoke openly about the reason behind Hollywood's hesitation to work with Bruce. In a quiet interview, he revealed that the actor's refusals were rooted not in ego or difficulty, but in the overwhelming reality of Bruce's presence. On a set, Bruce was more than a performer. He was a living embodiment of mastery. His intensity was not a performance, but a tangible force that made the space around him charged. For those who had built their careers on carefully constructed images and polished lines, standing beside Bruce felt like stepping into a blaze that could either ignite their own fire or burn them away. This truth sent shockwaves through the industry. It highlighted that the true challenge was not simply mastering a new style or learning a new move, but confronting a level of authenticity that demanded the same level of commitment and discipline. Chuck's reflections carried a weight that few could match. He described his encounter with Bruce not as an encounter with a charismatic actor, but with a martial artist who breathed the very air of the discipline. When he stood in the Colosseum opposite the dragon, he realized that the experience was not about proving oneself, but about recognizing that the other was a transcendent force. The fear that gripped many was not fear of defeat, but fear of exposure. To be seen as a mere mortal next to a flame that burned too bright for ordinary eyes. Those actors who chose not to work with Bruce were not avoiding his personality. They were recognizing that the craft he represented was beyond their reach. The very act of being on set with him exposed the fragility of the illusion that the rest of the world had built around the concept of an actor. This revelation reshaped the narrative of action cinema. It shifted the focus from spectacle to sincerity, from chaos to purpose. The film's choreography, once seen as a technical marvel, became a philosophical manifesto. The duel in the Colosseum, once a set piece, was now understood as a living proof that martial arts could be both brutal and beautiful. that violence could be expressed with grace, and that each movement could tell a story without a single spoken line. The partnership between Bruce and Chuck was no longer a mere footnote in film history. It was a beacon that illuminated how action movies could evolve. The reverberations of their collaboration extended into the dojo world. Modern martial arts training, once segmented into rigid styles, began to embrace a more fluid approach. Students of all ages now weave Jeet Kune Do's principles into their routines, seeking that balance between speed, precision, and philosophical depth. In turn, the influence of Chuck's disciplined karate echoes in the structure of many programs, reminding practitioners that consistency, technique, and mental fortitude are as vital as the raw speed that Bruce embodied. This synthesis, born from a single encounter on a Roman stage, has become the cornerstone of countless training regiments worldwide, turning each movement into a lesson of humility and respect. Even today, when new footage of Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee goes viral, it carries with it the weight of that legacy. The clip is not just a remastered fight, it is a reminder of the day a dragon's presence shattered the illusion of Hollywood glamour and replaced it with a raw, authentic force that demanded respect. The video invites viewers to see beyond the surface, to understand the true power that lies in the presence of a true martial artist. It reminds us that the real challenge in any confrontation is not the opponent, but the reflection we see in our own mirror. In that sense, the dragon's influence remains alive, not in the roar of crowds or the flashing lights of the cinema, but in the quiet determination of every fighter who learns that standing beside a legend can either elevate or ignite. The clip that had once been a forgotten relic in an archive, taped on a weathered reel in a dusty studio, unnoticed by most, now burst across the internet like a sudden bright flare. Within hours, the video appeared on every platform. YouTube thumbnails flickering with Bruce Lee's fierce gaze, TikTok loops of Chuck Norris's precise stance, Twitter feeds splattered with comments that ranged from reverent to bewildered. The world had not just seen a fight, it had witnessed a convergence of two living myths, a singular moment that seemed to transcend time and place. People who had never stepped into a gym found themselves swiping the footage, their fingers scrolling as the echoes of the Colosseum's ancient stones seemed to reverberate through their modern rooms. In forums dedicated to martial arts philosophy, threads erupted with titles like "Did Lee and Norris really share a Colosseum?" or "The Unseen Lesson of the Dragon's Presence." Even skeptics, who initially dismissed the clip as a staged stunt, began to engage, asking questions about the authenticity of the movement, the choreography, and the very concept of a real martial artist in the age of Hollywood spectacle. The viral surge did more than simply bring attention to an old fight. It sparked a renaissance in how people perceived the discipline itself. The footage was dissected, line by line, punch by punch. Commentators compared Lee's lightning-quick jabs to Norris's deliberate, power-packed blocks, noting how each action spoke of a different philosophy. Lee's approach, often described as Jeet Kune Do, appeared to be less about a set technique and more about an adaptive mindset, a fluidity that mirrored the way water shapes itself around obstacles. Norris's method, steeped in the disciplined lineage of karate, revealed an almost mechanical perfection, a precision that seemed to honor structure even in the midst of chaos. The internet, that vast digital agora, turned the clip into a communal experience. In a single day, thousands of fans posted their own interpretations, some quoting Lee's famous words, "Be formless like water," while others echoed Norris's steadfast commitment to knock out the enemy before he gets close. A meme exploded, featuring the two icons side by side, with a caption that read, "When the dragon meets the snake, the world holds its breath." Even professional fighters began to reference the video in their social media bios, sharing it as a personal mantra for humility and respect. Beyond the realms of online chatter, the influence of the clip seeped into physical spaces. Martial arts schools that had long followed rigid curricula found themselves revisiting their teaching methods. In one renowned dojo in California, the head instructor posted a brief clip of Lee's footwork on the school's internal network, using it as a case study in a lesson titled Dynamic Adaptation. Students, once focused solely on memorizing forms, now practiced improvisation, mimicking the fluidity Lee displayed in the arena. Meanwhile, a karate academy in Seoul began to integrate more rigorous conditioning drills that mirrored Norris's emphasis on speed and power, noting how the combination of these two styles could create a more balanced fighter. The reverberations were not limited to the physical realm. Philosophy students at universities around the world began citing the clip in papers on ethics and identity. A professor of Eastern philosophy in Tokyo used the footage as a visual aid in a lecture about the Buddhist concept of non-attachment, drawing parallels between Lee's emphasis on letting go and the fluid motion he exhibited. In an art history class at a college in Brazil, the clip was shown to illustrate how cinematic representation can shape collective memory, with students analyzing how the dramatic lighting and sound design amplified the symbolic significance of the duel. The spread of the clip also ignited conversations about legacy and authenticity in the film industry. Critics, previously quick to label action movies as mere spectacles, found themselves re-evaluating the nature of performance. In a panel discussion at an international film festival, a screenwriter noted how the viral footage forced a re-evaluation of the term stunt. They argued that the distinction between a choreographed scene and a genuine martial exchange had blurred, and that audiences were beginning to demand more authenticity in the portrayal of combat. A director, reflecting on his own career, acknowledged that the clip had reminded him that the heart of a film lies not in the grandiosity of its set pieces, but in the integrity of its performers. As the video continued to circulate, it also became a symbol for resilience. Social media influencers who had lost significant portions of their audiences due to platform changes began to draw inspiration from Lee's and Norris's unwavering dedication. They posted motivational reels, pairing clips from the fight with messages about perseverance, encouraging followers to stay disciplined, stay true. The viral clip, thus, became more than a historical artifact. It morphed into a living source of empowerment for a generation grappling with uncertainty. Moreover, the clip's impact was felt in the realm of education. In rural schools across India, teachers used the footage as a storytelling tool, weaving lessons about courage, respect, and humility into their curriculum. The image of two towering figures facing each other in an ancient arena served as a metaphor for the daily challenges students confront, whether in academics or personal life. The lesson was clear. One can only grow when faced with an opponent, and the true triumph lies not in vanquishing the other, but in mastering oneself. Meanwhile, the business side of martial arts also experienced a subtle shift. Merchandise lines featuring the two icons saw a surge in demand. Limited edition action figures, replica uniforms, and even a line of tactical gear marketed under the slogan "Fight like a legend" were launched in the wake of the clip's popularity. Sales reports indicated that consumers were not merely buying items, they were buying a piece of the philosophy, an aspirational identity that the viral footage had crystallized. In parallel, a group of filmmakers embarked on a project to create a documentary exploring the legacy of Lee and Norris, beginning with the very clip that had become a global phenomenon. Interviews with veterans of the film industry, historians, and martial arts scholars were interspersed with reenactments of the duel. The narrative delved into the cultural context of the 1970s, the societal shifts that shaped the characters' journeys, and how the collision of their philosophies influenced a generation of filmmakers. The project aimed to show that the viral clip was not an isolated incident, but part of a continuum where cinema and martial arts had always intertwined. Notably, the clip also prompted introspection among older martial artists who had spent decades teaching. A senior instructor from a Japanese dojo who had watched the footage for the first time as a young teenager recalled his early days on the tatami, where his instructor had spoken of respect for the opponent. He now saw how the footage echoed that lesson on a grander scale. He started a weekly Legends Corner in his dojo, where students would watch the clip and discuss how its lessons apply to their own training. This practice fostered a sense of community, reminding students that they were part of a lineage that honored both discipline and fluidity.